We're traveling back in time today to 1487, to a city that has not slept properly in months. Its walls are scarred by cannon fire, its streets grow quieter every day, and its people have reached the point where hunger is becoming more dangerous than any enemy possibly waiting outside. The men surrounding the city believe victory is close. The people inside are no longer certain tomorrow is even going to show up. Yet, hidden within one of the bloodiest chapters of medieval Spain is a moment that would quietly shape emergency medicine for centuries to come. Sometimes history leaves its greatest gifts in the darkest of places. Join me today as I uncover the siege that changed far more than the fate of a single city. By the spring of 1487, the Kingdom of Granada was running out of places to retreat to. For years, the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile had steadily pressed deeper into Nasrid territory. They were taking towns that had once seemed secure and closing the distance to Granada itself. Their next objective was Malaga, the Emirate's second largest city and its greatest Mediterranean port. It was not just another stop along the military campaign either. Malaga was prosperous and heavily fortified and critically important to things like trade and communication and survival. Above its streets stood the imposing Alcazaba and the fortress of Gibralfaro. I apologize. Gibralfaro. I'm not great with Spanish, even though I took 3.5 years in school. So anyway, it was connected by these protected passageways and surrounded by walls that had every intention of keeping invaders outside of these walls. Orchards stretched toward the sea, and vineyards produced sweet wines, for which the region was already becoming well known. Merchants and craftsmen and soldiers and families all lived behind these defenses that had every reason to inspire their confidence in their strength. Yet, strong walls have never been able to guarantee an easy future. History happens when people discover that the safest places that they know are really no longer safe at all. King Ferdinand understood exactly what he was facing too, and he did not come unprepared. Leaving Cordoba, he assembled an enormous force that included 20,000 horsemen, 50,000 laborers, thousands of support troops, experienced artillery crews, and a fleet capable of sealing Malaga away from the sea. Before reaching the city, his army first captured Vélez Malaga, steadily removing any realistic hope that any kind of outside reinforcements could ever reach the defenders in time. News of this advancing army spread quickly through this countryside. Some communities surrendered rather than having to endure the siege and face battle and bloody war, but others fled into nearby mountains and fortresses. Every single mile carried Ferdinand's forces closer to Malaga proper, and every mile narrowed the choices available to those waiting behind its walls. The defenders strengthened their positions while Ahmed el-Zegri prepared for what he believed would be a fight that he could still win. When the siege formally began in May, yes, all the way back in May, neither side imagined it would end quickly. They knew they were in for the long haul. Ferdinand attempted negotiation before committing fully to the battle, and he even offered some terms that might have spared the city from complete destruction. But el-Zegri refused. Some trenches and embankments and defensive works surrounded Malaga, while armed ships blocked the harbor, preventing supplies from reaching the city by sea. The first assaults were rather costly. The forces of Ferdinand reached the outer suburb only after suffering significant casualties, while defenders from inside answered with relentless artillery fire and sudden raids against siege works and determined counterattacks that repeatedly disrupted construction projects. Siege towers rose only to be destroyed. Tunnels were dug beneath the earth only to encounter the enemy countermines. Every success seemed to invite yet another obstacle just in the way. Every plan demanded another solution. Every sunrise revealed that another struggle was far from over. As the weeks became months, the balance slowly shifted. The attackers could replace damaged equipment and rotate exhausted soldiers and continue receiving provisions. But the people inside Malaga could do none of those things. Food and supplies steadily disappeared until survival became the only concern. Contemporary accounts describe the residents eating household animals, dogs and cats, and then turning to vine leaves, palm leaves, and eventually softening hides simply to quiet the pains of starvation. The defenders remained determined, but determination doesn't fill an empty stomach. Ferdinand himself grew impatient with waiting and ordered far more aggressive siege operations, including larger towers and mining operations beneath the walls. The city continued resisting with remarkable skill, destroying equipment and frustrating repeated assaults, yet each victory inside the walls came at a cost that could never be recovered. By the time the third month drew toward its close, the strongest defenses in southern Spain were protecting a population that was beginning to lose its battle with hunger, long before it lost its battle with soldiers. By early August, there was very little left to negotiate. The people of Malaga had held longer than many believed would have been possible for them, but endurance has its limits, no matter the amount of courage that they might have had. And El-Zegri eventually withdrew his remaining fighters into the fortress, leaving representatives of the city to seek whatever terms they still could obtain. They hoped Ferdinand might extend the same mercy he had offered before the siege tightened his grip. But that moment for generousness and generous conditions had already long passed. On August 13th of 1487, the city surrendered without conditions, placing itself entirely at the mercy of conquerors. 5 days later, on August 18th, the citadel itself yielded after the merchant Ali Doro successfully negotiated protection for only 25 families who would remain. Even then, this fortress still refused to give way until the following day, when its defenders finally accepted that no relief was ever going to come. For those watching from the walls, it must have been very painfully clear that they'd not simply lost a battle. They had watched the end of an era unfold, one decision at a time. The victory brought celebration for one side and unimaginable hardship for the other, as most wars do. Ferdinand had achieved one of the most important victories of the Reconquest, stripping Granada of its greatest seaport and one of its strongest defensive positions. Yet for the ordinary people who had survived months of bombardment and starvation, peace didn't arrive with comfort. Most of the remaining population was condemned to slavery, or even to death. Families were separated. Property was confiscated. Thousands were sold, exchanged for prisoners held elsewhere, or distributed among those who had participated in the campaign. El-Zegri himself was executed. Malaga's Jewish community was imprisoned until an enormous ransom could be gathered, a process that took years to complete. It's easy to measure victory by territory that was gained, but much harder to measure the lives permanently broken by the price of that gain. Hidden within this long and brutal campaign, however, was a quiet development that most people never realized began here. During this siege, the Spanish forces used dedicated vehicles whose sole purpose was to carry wounded soldiers away from the fighting. They were simple carts by modern standards, lacking trained medical crews or advanced equipment or any expectation of rapid treatment as we know it today. But yet something represented something entirely new here. For perhaps the first time in recorded military history, transportation itself became part of an organized medical care rather than an afterthought. The idea was remarkably simple. If an injured person could be moved more quickly toward treatment, more lives could be saved. Every ambulance that races through traffic today, every paramedic who begins treatment before even reaching a hospital, and every emergency vehicle carrying flashing lights can trace at least part of its story back to those humble carts rolling across the fields outside of Malaga. One of history's greatest medical advances emerged not from peace, of course, but from one of war's darkest classrooms. When the fighting ended, Malaga itself began changing almost immediately. New settlers arrived across Castle, Leon, Galicia, Extremadura, and the Levant, shaping both the city and the surrounding province. Administrators reorganized land ownership while homes and businesses and farms passed to completely new hands. Granada, now deprived of its principal port, stood increasingly isolated, and its own fate would soon follow. The siege had lasted only 4 months. 4 months was a very, very long time, and its consequences stretched across generations. Some victories alter borders. Others alter the way civilizations function completely. The fall of Malaga managed to do both, leaving behind a story that is remembered not only for conquest, but also for the unlikely beginning of an organized battlefield medical transport. Perhaps that's why the siege of Malaga still deserves our attention, more than 5 centuries later. It reminds us that human beings are capable of creating extraordinary acts of compassion, even while they're surrounded by extraordinary suffering, and sometimes because they're surrounded by extraordinary suffering. Progress and tragedy are not always separated by centuries. Sometimes they're not separated at all. Sometimes they arrive on the very same road. The first ambulance did not appear because the world had become kinder. It appeared because someone recognized that even in the middle of destruction, saving one more life was worth building a cart for. That simple idea continues moving forward every time an emergency vehicle answers a call today. Some roads begin with conquest, but eventually lead toward compassion, proving that even history can take a long way around. So what do you think leaves the greater legacy? The victory that changes the man, the map, or the simple invention that goes on saving lives for centuries? Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments if you can on Facebook, on the History Happens with Amanda Blackwood Facebook page, or on the YouTube page. Or you can follow this podcast wherever you get podcasts. I did try to make sure it was available wherever podcasts are available. But I am still shadow banned by Facebook for, I think, another week. So any interactions on the History Happens with Amanda Blackwood Facebook page is a huge help to me and helps me to keep doing what it is that I do every single day and finding these random stories. So that's it. Thanks for watching.